Welcome to the Extraordinary Yoga Teacher Summit, created by Great Energy. My name is Christopher, and I'm honored to be co-hosting the summit with Daniela Hess. The Extraordinary Yoga Teacher Summit is here to uplift and empower yoga teachers with the depth, steadiness, and skill that transform students' lives. Today's session is with our featured teacher, Peter Sterios, whose wisdom and experience offer so much to this path. Peter's been part of the global yoga community for over 5 decades. He founded Manduka and the Inner Teacher Academy, created Levity Yoga, hosts My Inner Teacher podcasts, taught yoga at the Obama White House for 3 years, and spoke at the Pentagon as a wellness expert for the U.S. Marine Corps. His first DVD, Gravity and Grace, made Yoga Journal's top 15 yoga videos of all time, and his first book, Gravity and Grace, is a 2019 Nautilus Book Awards gold medal winner. He lives on the central coast of California and teaches trainings, retreats, and workshops around the globe and online. Welcome, Peter.
Welcome. Thank you.
Peter, thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation and the topic being beyond the pose and education in deep listening and feeling. As an educator, you often use the word intimacy in a very unique way, not so much as in relationship with others, but as a way of relating to our own discomfort. Would you speak further to how does deep listening create this kind of intimacy with ourselves and why that connection is necessary to move beyond the mere performance of a yoga pose?
The trajectory of my practice was very typical in terms of focusing on asana, focusing on poses and Ashtanga, as well as sequences of poses until I broke my back. And once I broke my back, the transition from just performing poses and trying to inhabit a pose, meaning the pain was a threshold that I had to first resolve before I could move fully. And this process of healing from a broken back is, I'm grateful for. This is the irony of it. At the time, it was just a complete disruption, not only in my present moment of experience, but in my projected future of being a traveling yoga teacher and eventually an author. However, the process of healing was learning how to breathe without pain. That was the first step. And when your focus is in the present moment as much as pain drives you to the present moment, you learn to be sensitive. Like I noticed on the inhales, the pain was off the charts, and on the exhales, it dialed back about 10. So it was like, okay, the logical brain goes, I think I want to spend more time exhaling than inhaling. And the beautiful thing about that is it's supported now by all this research about how slow breathing is more important than deep breathing. So I got a, kind of trial and error education in how to breathe to influence the parasympathetic nervous system to create this calm state that's optimal for healing. And within 12 months, I healed from the broken back without surgery. So this intimacy is about creating an environment where we meet whatever shows up with as much compassion and empathy as we can. And on a physical level, physiological level, it's about creating softness in our bodies. And that's the secret sauce. And softness isn't a word that gets a lot of airtime in a typical power yoga class or an Ashtanga class. It's about muscular effort and force, and it's almost competitive in a way in a typical vinyasa class. So this secret that I have has been, let's say, a focus for me over the last 20 years of introducing softness back into a yoga practice. And it isn't yin yoga. It isn't restorative yoga. It's dynamic, flowing yoga, but with a quality that creates space, basically, internal space to feel, this is where the intimacy comes in. Intimacy with the feeling sense of your body.
I love how you describe softening into gravity, that it's something that requires a different kind of psychological courage. Can you expand on that a bit more?
Sure. So the the practice of yoga, and I'm also a licensed architect, and so the practice of architecture, we use this word space a lot, and we use this word gravity a lot. And for instance, in architecture, my favorite buildings are these structures that appear to defy gravity. They've been so exquisitely designed with such minimal amounts of structure, and yet they maintain this graceful, balanced strength. And the same is true in a yoga practice. How do we surrender into gravity when our education as children is stand up, stand straight, sit up tall, all these kinds of uh, subtle psychological forces to lift our bodies into this upright, non-slumping, non-slouching posture that has been demonized, let's call it, by, I don't know why, it's just the way we grow up. However, when you really understand gravity, gravity has an equal and opposite reaction. When you ground, when you allow yourself to soften and in a way surrender to gravity, you feel rooted, you feel grounded, your psychology changes, you feel safe. But the component that gravity, you don't hear much talk about it, is its opposite, which is what I call levity. And levity is this physical and psychological response to grounding. And in a physical sense, when you align your body with gravity, meaning there's no wasted energy trying to lift into gravity, you're just positioning yourself anatomically, structurally, with as neutral a spine as possible and balance of the pelvis, the shoulders, the head, all the way down into the soles of your feet. This understanding doesn't come from a recipe. It doesn't come from a list of instructions on, lift your rib cage, externally rotate your arms, all these kind of common cues that you find in a yoga class. It comes by that trust that if I surrender into gravity, it will create a response in my body, and my intuition responds to that response in a very uniquely personal way for your body and for your mind. And this was the piece that was an aha moment for me after I recovered from the broken back and started teaching this. How do I teach students who don't have big injuries, don't have strong, flexible bodies, and mostly younger, but as we age, aging is one of those humbling experiences of life where we start to lose function just slowly at first. And then as we get, like I'm 70, when you get into that decade of the 70s, that let's call it decay, it starts to accelerate a little. And so we have to be smarter, not practice more, but just smarter.
For the yoga students and the yoga teachers that are here listening to this, as you speak about this education and listening and trust, what would you suggest that yoga students and teachers, how would they begin to explore that deeper for themselves, becoming more intimate with their own subtle sensations, the breath and the grip and the resistance to awaken their own inner teacher? How can they leave this conversation and begin that next level of that inner journey for themselves?
As I was listening to you craft that question, the 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 answer, this kind of hard to hear answer is um, injury. Like injury or, having these situations in life where we unexpectedly fall or unexpectedly are in an automobile accident or something that jars you from the routine of your everyday life. These are the best opportunities to slow down because basically when those things happen on kind of a psychological level, it usually has some seeds of some higher form of intelligence asking you to slow down, asking you, hey, you're probably burning the candle at both ends or you're, overdoing life in some way. This is an opportunity for you to re-examine the choices you're making in life. So if you're if that idea of waiting for an injury to learn this stuff is not attractive, then the simplest poses is where you begin. And the simplest pose that I've started every class for 25, 30 years now is child's pose, but with the knees together. And with the knees together, there's this, because most child's poses are taught with knees wide apart, knees together forces a confrontation with belly breathing because your belly's compressed on your thighs. And, that's a whole nother story. But I intentionally introduce resistance or confrontation in simple poses to begin this process of learning how to meet resistance with as much empathy, compassion, and softness as you can. Simple things.
That's
Yeah.
brilliant. And so after child's pose, what is another pose that you share with your students so that they can explore further? How do I work with the resistance and the challenge? I'm thinking it's so windy out, right? You could practice outside in the elements and see how that resistance impacts you. What are some next steps?
Well, the way I teach all the classes, whether it's a dynamic flow, a passive or yeah, passive flow, or even a therapeutic class like a restorative yoga class, um, all practices have three parts. There's an opening sequence, there's a dynamic sequence, and there's a closing sequence. And the opening sequence is mostly on the floor, and it starts in child's pose. And then I go through a series of floor poses, seated cross leg poses, seated side bend, all these poses that basically are designed to do two things: warm up the major joints in your body and also stimulate marma points. Marma points aren't things that are usually talked about in a typical Western yoga class, but in my education of yoga, marma was talked about a lot. And marma are these yogis' acupuncture points in the body that when you learn how to use gravity as the needle, like think of pressure we did with your fingertips or a needle in traditional Chinese medicine. In yoga, it's using the shape of your body or one of your limbs where they cross or where they meet, and then letting gravity intensify that point. And that's what this opening sequence is designed to do. These points govern things like circulation, respiration, flexibility, energy, etc. And some are points for the heart, for the lung, for the kidneys, etc. So the dynamic sequence is either a fast flow or a slow flow. The fast flow is more about strength building and heat building. And the slow flow is more about balance, coordination, and the parasympathetic nervous system, not, kind of going crazy, just moving gracefully like you see in classical dance or, these forms of movement that are just effortless. These masters make it look effortless. And the last part is the closing sequence. And the closing sequence is integration. You've had this opening sequence, you've stimulated channels in the dynamic sequence, and then the closing sequence is about making space for calm, making space for integration of the sensations that you've generated during practice and the mental states that you've created during practice. That piece is usually 15 to 20 minutes long at the end of a class. Most classes in this day and age, it's, 2-minute warm up. If it's a 60-minute or a 75-minute class, 40 to 60 minutes of flow, and then a nice long 3-minute shavasana at the end to have a relaxation experience. I restructure that a little bit in a typical practice.
As far as essential qualities that an extraordinary yoga teacher cultivate for themselves, we've touched on working with pain and with softening and trust and that connecting to that intimate teacher within. Are there any other qualities that in your experience you would say it would be wise for a yoga teacher to continue to cultivate for themselves so that they can be even more effective for their students?
I I will speak from personal experience on this topic. I studied with one teacher for 20 years, and that's rare in this day and age of what I call convenient yoga, where you go to a yoga class because the time fits, or the location fits, or your friends are going, so you're going. For me, I don't even understand how that is helpful in a way other than for a workout. My experience with this teacher was so beneficial for the changes that came in my life for the better, like just mentally, physically, spiritually. I had really no orientation toward spirit at all up until the age of 20. And then beyond that, it was just kind of mishmash until I met this teacher. Now, for 20 years, I was devoted to this teacher. I ended up assisting him in his travels. I would travel with him. I managed his business side. And at year 20, he basically said, "Hey, Peter," I mean, his exact words, "it's time to get off the tit." And that in that moment when he said that to me, I was not expecting it. And so it didn't make sense to me what he was saying, because I felt like I had lived up to my part of the agreement of this kind of disciple and guru relationship. But in the end, it was this um, gift that he gave me. And it took me a few years to process that gift, to understand what it meant. But basically, what he was telling me is turn your attention inward. And that's my advice to these teachers that are listening here, especially if you've been only teaching for, say, 4 to 5 years. And even those that have been teaching for 15, 20 years, wondering what's next, well, what's next is to let go of some of the things you learned and use your own day-to-day experience to guide you. And what is your day-to-day experience? Well, there's kind of a changing world going on right now. I don't know anyone that isn't stressed at some level. And how do we meet that stress with a recipe? Like a recipe of primary series in Ashtanga, or 26 poses in Bikram. How does that uh, adapt to changing conditions in our lives? And the only way that I've been able to understand that question is to practice in a way where every day is different. Every day I practice is different. There's no repetition in terms of sequencing, there's no repetition in terms of pose selection. There are general groupings of poses that I do every day, but beyond that, I let my body communicate. And how does the body communicate? We have this aversion to this word pain, and I've had intense pain in my life on multiple injuries and surgeries and things that took months, if not years, to recover from. And I've come to understand pain as the language the body uses to communicate imbalance. And that's all. Like we have to lose the attachment to what caused it. because that's a thing in the past. And then how do we work with the present moment experience of pain in our bodies? And as I shared earlier, my broken back forced me into this new relationship with breath. I had to learn how to breathe without pain because not breathing wasn't an option, you know. So we have options. Most of us in those moments of pain, we just choose poses that make us feel good. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about moving into shapes, poses that cause you anxiety, and then learning how to deal in that moment of anxiety. And most of us want to push or grind or get through it, no pain, no gain kind of mentality. But that's counterproductive. The opportunity is to make a new relationship with that sensation, and it's a gift. And in hindsight, my broken back and the pain that I went through with that, it instead of ruining my career as a yoga teacher, it's created an incredible opportunity for me for the yoga videos that I produced that were filmed by this fantastic filmmaker named Mickey Willis, and uh, and then writing my book, which was one of those coincidences in life where a publisher reached out to me and said, "Hey, we saw the name of your workshop at Esalen, wondering if you want to write a book with that title, Gravity and Grace." And I said, "I've never written a book." And they said, "Doesn't matter. Here's an advance. You have 12 months to write it. We'll see you in 12 months." So that was how that happened. And writing a book, the joke in my family is it's worse than having a baby. It was sleepless nights, working crazy hours. Yeah, and then that final push to get it done was grueling. But then, it launched right during the pandemic. It hasn't been a huge seller, but it did, during the pandemic, some Nautilus Books found it somehow and they gave it its gold medal. And for me, that was just totally unbelievable. Yeah,
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm really, really touched by that.
sure.
Peter, you have a beautiful and incredibly generous gift for participants that are with us right now, watching and listening to this. And friends, please click below because you have an opportunity to receive this beautiful gift. It's 12 months access to the Inner Teacher Academy's Inner Circle. Peter, can you tell us a little bit more about what happens in the Inner Teachers Academy's Inner Circle and what our participants can look forward to?
Sure. So the Inner Teacher Academy is we created it for the training, advanced trainings that we're going to be doing. And to support that, we learned about this technology called Circle. It's like a social media app that allows communities to stay within their community without the distractions like the other social media, more commercial social media platforms. So the inner circle is designed, we meet 3 to 4 times a month online and with different things. Like one of the things is called Teacher's Lounge, and that's literally just 60 minutes of question and answer once a month. Any question is open, personal, yogically, whatever. The next one is the book club. We also meet once a month. It's called G&G Threads, Gravity and Grace Threads. And that is where I read an excerpt from my book. And then as a community, we talk about that excerpt and how it applies to your life or your practice. And a lot of the excerpts that I've selected out of my book have that dual quality of it's useful on the mat and it's also useful off the mat. And then the last one on a regular basis is called Mind and Motion Lab. And that's a 60-minute movement practice where I use video teaching and teach a live class. So those three things happen consistently every month, and they're free for anyone in the inner circle. Within the inner circle, though, there is a paywall for 270 filmed sequential practices that I filmed during the pandemic teaching online. And so if that 3 times a month you want more, you can go there, and it's a marginal cost, and I can't even remember, but it's not that much. And you have access to these pre-recorded classes. There's also opportunities to participate in some of the trainings. We have a 50-hour training and a 100-hour training where you get a little taste. Like Mind and Motion Lab is a little snapshot of the mind and motion trainings that we do, which are 50-hour and 100-hour. So it's just a way to get into our community at no real expense, to see what it's like and get a feel for it, and then move on. Yeah, to me, that's been a real pleasure for me as a teacher, to just to be able to turn on my computer, and I've got students from Egypt or London or New Zealand that are there just participating in this community. For me, that's the beauty of technology, and I just want to keep that going.
I can feel how much you really care about this community. So truly it comes through.
Thank you.
Um, my last question, and I have
Sure.
usually asked this, but Peter, what is one of your greatest and simplest joys currently in your life right now?
8 hours sleep.
Respect.
Those nights are rare for me, but I had one 2 nights ago, and oh my God, my day that day was just like incredible. And I thought, I got to pay more attention to this 8 hour sleep business.
It's real. It's real. I
Yeah,
remember I texted Christopher the other day. It was like three cherries had lined up in Vegas, right?
I
It was out
know.
in upstate. I slept 7 hours straight, and I forget the third thing, but I kept saying, God, this is a great day. This is such a great day. So sleep is so wonderful.
Yeah, it really is. Um, I've developed a kind of a consistent pattern of going to bed early, but waking up early. And I usually am on my mat by like 4:30 or 5 in the morning. And I do this because I have a teenage daughter at home, and I prepare her meals in the morning and pack her lunch and stuff. But when I had those odd days where she's not in the house, and I can sleep, I I still get up, but just for one reason or another, this day I slept till 7:30, you know.
I get it. I get it. Thank you, Peter. It's been an absolute joy to be with you.
Thank you.
A pleasure and an honor. So thank you very much. And we both, Christopher and I, look forward to connecting further in the inner circle and to explore it ourselves. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.
We really appreciate you.
Same.